Compositing is basically putting together the pieces of a visual effects shot, be it blue screen elements, live action elements, and then putting those all together, pretty much the last step before the shot goes out to film and people see it in the theaters. We're doing such fantastic things, such amazing creatures that couldn't possibly happen in real life. We have to do all we can to try and make it look like it's actually really happening in the scene. And that's part of our job as compositors. I started in the visual effects industry working on Macs. You know, I watched movies like Star Wars and Poltergeist and Back to the Future, and I really wanted to know how these things were made and the magic behind them. My first Mac was a Mac Plus that my parents had generously bought us. You know, all the system, everything on that one floppy disk, system, the applications and the documents, everything on there. So with Mac Paint, obviously, and then eventually the Photoshop, you know, definitely expanded what you could do in the computer, just different tools in general, but I always preferred doing my composites in After Effects. Right here we have a dual 125 G4, and the other Macs that we have are dual 125s as well. We're running Adobe After Effects, Adobe Photoshop, Commotion, and then a lot of third-party plugins for After Effects. Van Helsing is the character who went after Dracula, tried to defeat Dracula, and in this movie it's from the writer and director of the Mummy films, it's Stephen Sommers. You know, what would happen if we put all these famous movie monsters in the same film with Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, and many, many other creatures? What crazy stuff are they going to get into? And our hero is Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing, trying to make sure these evildoers don't do evil. What I'm going to be showing you is from the opening sequence of the film. It's kind of the prologue to the film. It's sort of in flashback to help to get us into that mood of an old movie, monster movie kind of feel. The director chose to present the opening sequence in black and white. It's made for a really neat way to start the movie off with a bang. So this is basically the tail end of the opening sequence where we're introduced to Dr. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, and you know, you can't have a good Frankenstein movie without the villagers with torches wanting to you know, destroy the monster. So basically this shot's supposed to be, you know, really big and epic, and we're also introduced to the fact that you can kind of see inside Frankenstein's head. So we have some real fire that's happening in the shot, but we don't have any explosions. We have a giant light that's in the shot. And basically we have the crew, a partial blue screen, and since they didn't build this, the top of the windmill to proper scale, this is supposed to be a couple more stories higher in the air, but they're only about 15 feet off the ground, as you can tell by how big the crew members are. So basically the task here was to add a lot more fire, a lot more smoke, add an interesting sky, remove that giant light that was in the shot, remove the crew and basically everything past this point, and insert mad villagers, upset villagers with torches in their hands. This seemed like a really good candidate to be able to composite it in After Effects because of the massive camera move and the layering of all these different elements, and the amount of flexibility that we wanted to have, moving people over here, moving people over there, moving fire, moving smoke in the sky. Just seemed like a really good opportunity to use 3D compositing in After Effects on the Mac. Here are some of the crowds that they were actually photographed. These are real people that were shot in clumps. Ran the camera for a little while, just had them act. And it looks kind of odd, they're just in that little clump, but that's because then they would move over a little bit in properly defined areas. So the first step was trying to get all those crowds together and to try and make it look like one unique big crowd. This is an image of our the match move that was done for this shot. The match move is basically kind of trying to recover in the computer where the real camera was moving around, so that when we put our CG elements into the shot, they look like they actually exist. Yeah, a lot of 2D tracking of various points, extrapolating where those points are in space, and this is what we get out of it. So this is the basis of 3D compositing. So we have that very accurate computer graphics camera that represents what's happening in the real world. So that when we just put our cards out in that world, in that space, we know it's all going to track, we know it's all going to line up. So, but basically, as you can see this big pan around, traditionally what we might have done is taken all those crowd elements and basically put them together into one big crowd and track that in. Well, in this case, that wouldn't necessarily work because this camera move is so radical. It would, at the very beginning of the shot, the crowds would have looked very warpy and very odd because everything might look fine at the end of the shot, but right around here, when the camera's panning and moving and tilting, there's all sorts of parallax and perspective issues that wouldn't work properly if it was just a card. You know, as good as that crowd might look, near the edges of the frame, it would look very warpy and smeary, and we didn't want to do that at all. And also, we wanted to have more people kind of surrounding the windmill, so that approach wasn't going to work. So what we did in After Effects is basically layered the crowd in a kind of a dome type way so that the camera, when the camera spins around, these guys won't be warped, these guys won't be warped, so you can see how these are lined up in space. They didn't want just large, dense clumps. They needed to have some stragglers that were, you know, like, where's the party? You know, what's going on? I missed the meeting. I don't know where to stand. So these guys over here were articulated out of you could see like these guys out here. We just trimmed them out of that shot and put them in another area. So they are being cloned and put all over the place. Here's another representation of where they are in 3D space. So this gives us a lot more flexibility with the camera move. Then I could just say, okay, these guys need to be a little bit more to the right, a little more to the right. No chance of odd warping or distortion or anything like that. So at the beginning of the shot, although we do have some real live action fire and explosions, this is supposed to be very exciting. We want more fire, we want more explosions, more smoke, and also the sky isn't particularly inspiring. So basically, using that match move, we were able to layer in various fire and explosions and things like that. Here you can see the sky being layered in and these explosions and smoke and things like that. And then kind of showing you the before and after. Here are all the layers of people. And this is actually a really good description. Basically, I took the camera and I pulled it back so we can see all the 3D layers. So here are the layers of fire and of smoke and of the sky, and how they all exist in that 3D world. And the great thing is that it's all happening in the composite, so that we can make all of the color and edge changes that we want and not have to go through different steps. We don't have to go into Maya or any other 3D programs. We can do it all here in the composite. And these are all just flat cards that, when properly angled to the camera, they're very convincing. It's surprisingly powerful. I mean, the uses for After Effects are, you know, obviously a lot of broadcast designers use it for flying logos and things like that, but there's a lot of power under the hood. I mean, it's several hundred, hundreds of shots have been created for the movies in After Effects. And there's a lot of depth to the program, and the cool thing is that it's relatively easy to learn. And if you know Photoshop, you're halfway there. You're more than halfway there. It's basically Photoshop with keyframes.